I think the first thing that we need to tackle, the first thing we need to get into is the first SmackDown coming after WrestleMania 40. And Mark, it's going to concern and it's going to revolve around maybe not so much the new undisputed WWE Universal Champion. We'll get into him in a second. But the Bloodline. And they found a way to start a new chapter, a new book, if you will, for the Bloodline on Friday night. And we also saw a newer member of the Bloodline as well. What did you think of SmackDown this past Friday, Mark?
I thought it was good, Dave. Remind me, Dave, if Paul Heyman is ever talking to us, to always check your six. I'm always, while he's talking to us, I'm going to be looking over my shoulder because it seems like every time Paul has one of these long soliloquies about what the tribal chief wants, somebody gets their damn wig split. And wow, what a ass whooping that we got from Tama Tonga.
And Solo Sikoa on Jimmy Uso. Yeah, set him up bad. And Bully, what I loved is Paul Heyman earlier in the night saying, winning and losing matters. There's consequences for losing. And then Paul Heyman had a speech which was really a little bit different than anything we've heard from Paul Heyman. He was praising Jey Uso. He was praising Cody Rhodes. And he mentioned how Roman Reigns took his eye off the ball. And because he took his eye off the ball, and he specifically laid out a moment, and that's the moment he picked up that chair from Seth Rollins, and he made a choice. He could have went after Cody Rhodes, finished Cody Rhodes, defended that championship, and moved on, but he decided to go after Seth Rollins. And by going after Seth Rollins, it gave Cody Rhodes that opportunity to take advantage and win the match. And you could tell, guys, as Paul Heyman is talking and describing that main event of WrestleMania 40, you see the look on Solo Sikoa's face. And that's the thing. All this time, for the most part, with Solo Sikoa, guys, we couldn't read Solo Sikoa at all. He had pretty much that same deadpan look. But that was not the case on Friday. As Paul Heyman was describing what happened, you kind of looked at Solo Sikoa. He was looking at Heyman like, dude, what are you talking about? And for a second, Paul Heyman feared for his life. And he repeated the same words that Paul Heyman said earlier in the night. Wins and losses matter, and losing has consequences. And I think, unfortunately, for Jimmy Uso, Mark, he found out what it's like to lose, and he found out about those consequences on Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to be the piece or the straw that breaks the camel's back. But getting to what you just said, Dave, about Solo Sikoa's face, some of that is intentional. I want you to be stoic. But some of it is the light is coming on. And Bully knows this, that when we talk about your moneymaker, you're talking about here. In your face is where the money lies. Whether you're happy, whether you're pissed off, whether you're frustrated or sad, you have to be able to show a gambit of emotion. And I feel like Solo for a while was just standing there like, I'm supposed to be here because I was him before. I stood there in the nation, just letting people do their thing and me not getting in the way. But eventually they asked my opinion. Eventually they asked me to do things that I had never done before. And I think now we're going to get to see a more expressive Solo Sikoa because they trust him to do more because the light is coming on.
Let's take a look at the evolution of Solo Sikoa. He debuts at 30. He didn't debut at 39. Did he debut at 39 with the run-in, or did we see him a couple weeks before?
No,
we
saw him before the run.
We had seen Solo. So Solo comes in. He was basically a hitman for Roman Reigns and for Paul Heyman. Standing there, not saying a word, a classic mafia-esque hitman. Just there to be the heavy, just there to look mean and scare everybody away, just there to basically say, if anybody thinks about screwing with the wise man or the tribal chief, you have to deal with me and my Asiatic spike. Call it by the name it is, the Asiatic spike. What a great year and a half for Solo to just be standing there and hanging around. Obviously, he had his match with Cena, but he's getting a great education into what it's like to be in a main event spot without having to be the actual main eventer. Because the next chapter, the new chapter for Solo will be his evolution. Will be, now they're going to start to peel back the layers on Solo Sikoa. Now we're going to start to learn who Solo Sikoa is a little more. Why Solo thinks the way he does. Whose side is he truly on? He's been able to just stand there and take this all in. And take it all in, now they're going to start to bring it all out of him. This is why, and we always go back to this, character development is so important. He already has a foundation. We know exactly who Solo is. But now we're going to learn what makes Solo tick. He's already in the story. He's already established his character. We know what his finish is. We know what he's capable of the ring. We know about the credible victory he has over Cena. Now we move him forward. This is why slow and steady wins the race. And I'm looking forward to the next few months. Actually, I'm looking forward to the next year. Because by next WrestleMania, Solo should find himself in quite the spot on the card.
Yeah, because in the background, and we'll get into what Cody said in his promo on SmackDown, in the background, guys, is The Rock. I mean, The Rock walked away on Monday on Raw, but he didn't walk away before saying that you and I are going to be in the ring. Now, whether that happens at next year's WrestleMania, whether that happens at SummerSlam, we don't know. But that Rock-Cody story and that match is waiting in the wings. So what do you do in the meantime? Obviously, Roman Reigns is going to be off of TV for a little bit here as he's licking his wounds after losing at WrestleMania. So how do you fill that void? By people stepping up. It's very much like any sport. Starter goes down, somebody needs to come off the bench and start. And I feel like Solo Sikoa is doing that. What I saw with Solo Sikoa on Friday night, I saw a leader. Like, I saw the emergence of somebody that was by someone's side to being front and center. Solo Sikoa, for all intents and purposes, in that segment and on that show, was the head of the table, at least for now, on our TV. The way he handled Paul Heyman, the way he made the judgment on Jimmy Uso, and also what he did to Paul Heyman afterwards. Paul Heyman picked up his phone and to call Roman Reigns, and Solo Sikoa stomped on that phone. So again, little bits, little nooks and crannies of a story that we're going to see if it plays out over the course of the next couple of weeks and the next couple of months. Go ahead, Bully.
Hanging out in the background and then stepping up to be a leader. Let's do a little football comparison, which you guys love to do. How long did Steve Young hang out on the bench while Joe Montana was starting, right? And then Steve Young got his call up and boom, Steve Young made a difference. Aaron Rodgers hanging out in the background on the bench. Brett Favre goes down, boom, Aaron Rodgers steps up and becomes the leader. Tom Brady. There you go.
Drew
Bledsoe goes down. And that's what it is. Those quarterbacks sat under the learning trees of those other great quarterbacks. That's what Solo has been doing. He's been sitting under the learning tree of Roman and Heyman, and now he's going to step up.
And it was cool to see him be the one to make the setup. So now he may be the one to have to answer the way The Rock did for bringing me in, and Ron Simmons being like, "Hey, I don't tell you to do everything. I do everything. You do what I tell you to do." And that is what I feel like now we're going to get from Solo. Solo's going to be the one that's going to be the heater, the one that's going to take all of the kind of the marching orders from Roman Reigns, especially if Paul Heyman is going to be a part of the Paul, you're losing control type of deal. There's so many ways that they can go with it, and then Paul gain control again, because there are more people in the Samoan dynasty and in the bloodline that could come in and possibly be like, you know what? I think this is a better option. And Paul has always kept a feather in the cap. So I love to see what that story is going to be like.
Yeah, and it's about stories, like you said, it's characters, it's personalities, it's emotional connection. And I don't think we saw the end of it. Just like any other story or sequels to movies, what do we see? New characters added. And I think we saw a big one added on Friday night with Tama Tonga. And I don't think that's the only one. I think we're going to see other characters added to this story as well. And it's going to make sense. And listen, we just saw physicality. Now there's going to have to be the setup. Who is this person? Why is he being brought in? Why now? Why are we seeing the change? How long is Roman going to be out? When is the next time we're going to see Roman? When is The Rock coming back? Again, it all goes back to that family tree that The Rock showed us during that press conference, right? It wasn't just 5 or 6 names. He put out that tree, that whole family tree to look at, and the tradition and the history, but also that bottom line of everybody that's a part of that family right now involved in pro wrestling. And again, this is where in this new era of the WWE, I talked about last week how they have no problem mentioning pro wrestling. They had no problem on Friday night mentioning New Japan. They had no problem. Think about it. How about Cody Rhodes in his promo mentioning the NWA, and not Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair NWA, but Billy Corgan NWA. Like, this is a different era where now you could play a part in what's going on in different organizations right now in pro wrestling. Go ahead, Bully.
Ask yourself this. Back in the day, you never heard companies refer to other companies. Why?
Because they were in competition and they kind of wanted to just pretend that they didn't exist.
Why would the WWE start acknowledging these other companies now?
Because there's no competition. There's no reason for them not to.
And the world is not stupid.
Now they can use it to their benefit.
Yeah,
now they can use it to their benefit.
That is the reason right there, Bully. That's the reason, because they can use it to their benefit. The fans are not stupid. They know that there's other wrestling companies that exist. We've been playing fantasy warfare since we was 9 years old. So I'm looking at, say there's a 6-month storyboard, Dave. This is the answer to the question that you said about how long it's going to be before Roman gets back, or how long is it going to be before Rock and Cody. I would put a year timeline on The Rock and Cody. The Rock probably won't be back until before WrestleMania next year. But Roman, he deserves a 6-month break. And they need to go through the next 6-month story arc of the bloodline building itself like the NWO did. They brought in so many members and everybody didn't stick. And when somebody didn't stick, what happened, Bully, when you're in a game and and then the principalities go,
yep,
you get beat out.
Yep.
So
you get jumped in and you get beat out.
Yes, sir. And there's so many things that they can do that I feel like would be great options. Listen, I'm not making any calls, but I know they listen. And if you think that's bullshit, then please give me a ring and tell me to my face, because that's some good shit.
But you also have to be
hold on one second, David. They will never allow to happen with the Bloodline that happened to the NWO. You learn from history. You learn from the mistakes. We saw how watered down the NWO got. The red and black, the black and white, the pink and green, the your sister's ass. After a while, it just didn't work anymore. That won't happen. Everybody that is brought into this Bloodline story over the next year, and as we saw on Friday Night SmackDown, the debut of Tama Tonga, and I want to get into Tama as the day progresses here.
Yep.
They are going to plug people in that add to the story, not water down the story. Characters that can pick a side. I'm with The Rock for this reason. I'm with Roman for this reason. Because it would be a waste to not split the Bloodline up right now. That story is right there. Rock's version of the Bloodline, Roman's version of the Bloodline. And when you tell this story the right way, you eventually get to something big. And what do you think they're going to try to get to? They'll try to get to the Survivor Series, and we might have a Bloodline-esque War Games match. That's what I foresee.
Don't tease me.
You like that one?
Don't tease me. I'm with it.
A Bloodline rules, War Games, whatever, for control of the Bloodline. And, and I'm just spitballing here. If The Rock's version of the Bloodline wins, Roman has to bow before Rock and acknowledge Rock as the leader of the Bloodline. And I think by the time we see Roman come back, Roman will be a full-blown babyface. I think Roman Reigns is a full-blown babyface as of this moment right now. Coming out of Cody's promo, the Raw after Mania, Cody put Roman over hard. The fans cheered and react. Damian Priest going on the bump and putting over Roman and talking about how Roman has carried this company for a while. This guy comes back, people will now be happy to see him.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And again, gone long enough.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be gone for a little bit of time here. Like you said, Mark, 6 months. It may be that long that he's gone. But in the meantime, you're building other stories so that when he returns, as Bully said, think about the pop that Roman Reigns would get if he's gone for 6 months. I mean, think about what the fans, the appreciation that he would get from the fans when he comes back. And again, we talked about this going into WrestleMania 40. We said about as big as WrestleMania 40 was, the biggest matches weren't happening. We weren't getting Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. We weren't getting The Rock and Cody, and we weren't getting The Rock and Roman Reigns. So in people's minds, what they feel are the biggest matches we didn't get. Hell, we may not get it at next year's WrestleMania because there's only so many matches. At some point, we're getting Cody and Rock, and at some point, we're getting Rock and Roman Reigns. Those are two big bombs that the WWE can drop on the WWE universe, and they don't have to rush it. There's no reason to do it tomorrow, 6 months from now, or even a year from now. Bully, that's a lot for the WWE universe to consume and be excited for.
And because I'm familiar with the booking styles of Triple H, Bruce Pritchard, Paul Heyman, these guys book backwards, which is the correct way to book pro wrestling, meaning they might know right this very moment our main event for WrestleMania 41 is Cody versus The Rock. Or Cody versus, let's just say, Randy Orton, and we're doing Rock and Roman for Bloodline stuff. They probably have an idea where they want to go. Now they'll book backwards. And when wrestling is booked backwards, that's when we get the beauty of the storytelling and the character development. I'd be willing to bet $1 they know where they want to go. Obviously, injuries withstanding, or Rock's schedule, or stuff like that. I'm definitely in. I've been in on the whole Bloodline story, and I want to see the evolution of these, the continued evolution of a Solo and the new evolution and introduction of a Tama.
Now, you said something, Bully, that's really interesting to me. You talked about booking backwards and knowing what your story is going to be 8 months, a year out. Nick Nemeth was hosting with me on Friday, and he was talking about, going to a Monday Night Raw, and 2 hours before a Monday Night Raw, everything that was planned was completely ripped up and went in a completely different direction 2 hours before they're about to go live on a Monday Night Raw.
If the booker is changing his mind 2 hours before, let's not call it the booker, let's call it Vince McMahon. If Vince McMahon is changing his mind 2 hours before the show and ripping everything up, obviously he's not happy with the show and he thinks his team can do better, or he wants to see something different. But it makes it difficult for the talent to immerse themselves in the role. Example, let's say you're an actor, an actress, you're studying for a role. You learn your lines, and 2 hours before you go on set, the director says, nope, I'm ripping up my own script. I'm going to write a new script, or you'll have cue cards to read off of. Even the most professional of actors are going to be like, oh, wow, this is very jarring to me right now. I've already learned my lines, learned how I would deliver them as this character. What do I do now? Same thing happens to a wrestler. You start going into a mode where you start compensating for the changes. And when you compensate for those changes at the last minute, your performance is going to fall short. And that's why we were coming on this show and burying the WWE and Vince McMahon's creative at the time.
There's no doubt about it. And I would think that, and you guys have both told me that, hey, WWE, in the world of the WWE, you're dealing with scripted promos. Now, I don't know if that has changed maybe a little bit under the new regime, but we know in the past it's scripted promos. But you both told me that if you buy in, if you believe the words you're saying, it doesn't matter if it's scripted or not, because you're believing in those words. You're completely immersed in the character. I would think that's pretty impossible to do when everything that you are ready to or prepared to say or do is getting ripped up 2 hours before the show. It's got to be a lot more difficult to jump in the pool of creativity when things are being changed on the fly. And I think for the most part, guys, and Bully, you're 100% right. It showed on what we were watching on Monday nights. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, Bully, that we were like, you know what? Let's talk about a Raw from 1999 instead of what the Raw that we just watched last night.
I remember that.
Now, Mark, Mark, this is the honest to God truth. There were times Bully would call me 2 hours into a Monday Night Raw and be like, Dave, what the fuck are we talking about on the show tomorrow?
That's if I didn't fall asleep.
Yeah, and there were times I would come on the air and say, you know what, Bully, I got to admit to you, I fell asleep 2.5 hours into the show. I didn't watch the main event because I passed out. Like, those conversations happen, Mark, on air when talking about the WWE and Monday Night Raw. And that's when Raw was the flagship show. This is before, SmackDown became the juggernaut that it is. There was a lot of bad.
I'd like to use that.
The black and gold was the hot shit then.
Yes, without a doubt.
Correct. That's a great point, Mark. But I'd like to bring up a point about how bad the WWE was at that point and look at where they are now, right? Then they were at the lowest of the low in the valley, and now they're at their peak. I'm going to use a comparison right now. AEW right now is going through some struggles, but AEW can learn from the WWE in that the WWE was in a bad spot 5 years ago, and now they're in a great spot again. And Mark, we were part of the Attitude Era. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We were the Rolling Stones of the pro wrestling business. And then all of a sudden, right after Ruthless Aggression, the bottom fell out. And there were like 1,500 people at house shows. It happens. So I'm trying to turn this into a positive for like an AEW who's going through some growing pains right now. Look at how the WWE got through their storm. That's the same thing you need to do with your storm right now.
Why, Bully, did that happen? Triple H.
Sure.
You look at the black and gold, that was the hottest shit. I used to look so forward to the war between AEW and the black and gold on NXT. And I had Raw and SmackDown was like second and third and fourth to me during that era where we're talking about. And when they switched to the new NXT, bro, like it just wasn't the same. And I think that Triple H is taking what he envisioned and how he envisioned with the black and gold and is doing a phenomenal job right now, because it's the stories are long-term booking, but also you have exciting moments and matches. Man, you remember all the matches? We talked to Ivar. The matches that we saw between Ivar and Ricochet,
yep,
when styles collide, like I love that kind of booking. So it's like to be able to do that, like it can be done, is what I'm saying. And like you said, be hopeful. Like what is right now is not going to stay that way.
Well, you would hope, because let's be honest here. If Vince McMahon was still in charge and Vince McMahon was still in charge of creative, would we have seen the things that we saw over the past 2 years in the WWE? Probably not. Who knows? We might be still having shows on Busted Open where we're bitching and complaining about Monday Night Raw.
We might still have been getting Roman Reigns chained to a turnbuckle post, having dog food poured over the top of his head.
Yeah, saying suffering succotash in promos.
Right. Yep.
Like, we might be still going through that. Let's face it, guys. Like you mentioned NXT. The reason NXT was so big was because the WWE main roster at that time creatively was so bad. A big reason why AEW hit at the perfect time, because probably creatively the WWE was at its lowest when AEW started. That really helped AEW become an arena full of fans early on, because wrestling fans were tired of what they were seeing with the WWE. That's not the case right now. I mean, there's not a lot to bitch about when it comes to the WWE. When you're hearing pro wrestling, when you're hearing New Japan shout-outs and NWA shout-outs, when you're getting matches, Mark, like you said about Ivar and Ricochet, where both guys shine and look good coming out of that match, and you get a story like we've gotten with the Bloodline.
All right, what do you want to know? What do you got? What do you need?
I have Tama Tonga. I mean, you just said it. Like, well, you know him. Like, talk a little bit about him, a little bit of his background. I want to hear. You know, he's a student of the Team 3D Academy. Now he had one of the most impactful moments on Friday Night SmackDown. He's now a part of the WWE. You could give that unique perspective. So here you go.
In 2009, Haku came to the Team 3D Academy. Then we were located in Kissimmee, Florida. And he asked me and Devon to train his two sons, Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa. Haku said he also wanted to be involved in their training. So they trained with me and Devon 3 days a week at the academy. And then I gave Haku the keys to our school so he could come in on Sundays and work privately with his sons. I saw a lot in the both of them very, very early on. As a matter of fact, to me, Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa, who we have not seen yet, maybe we will down the road, they were the Usos before the Usos, as far as a Samoan or Polynesian type of team. I saw them as a modern day SST, Samoan SWAT team. Not necessarily the size of those guys, but the same look, the same feel, the same vibe, the same intensity. Tama Tonga had the majority of the personality. And that's what I'm looking forward to. Tama had a good run in New Japan. His facials are really good. Like, do you guys, in rugby, before they play a game, they have something called the haka. Tama Tonga has that crazy ass haka face where his eyes go wide open and you could see the whites of his eyes and his cheeks go up and the tongue comes out. He has a ferocity to him. He's scary. He's intense. He's all of these things. And I think that everything that he has learned so far, whether that was his initial training, things that he's learned from his dad, the stuff that he's learned in New Japan along the way, are going to provide an incredible foundation for the WWE to build their version of Tama Tonga on. I think he can be a very, very important part of this bloodline with more of a psychotic killer edge to him as opposed to Solo's, stoic, quiet killer. Tama Tonga is the guy that's just off the deep end. When you see Solo, he'll stop you in your tracks and you're very weary of him and you'll go out of your way to walk around Solo. You see Tama Tonga, if they bring that real personality and character out of him, he's the guy that when you see him, you just run. Because the guy's insane. The guy's a psycho. He's just going to charge you and he's going to dig his teeth into your neck.
Jeez.
But that's the kind of intensity he has. That's what I've seen from him before. I don't know what the WWE wants out of him, but I think that's very easy to get out of him. He's kind of like a
pit bull off the leash.
He's almost like Mickie from Natural Born Killers. I'm a natural born killer. He's just a psycho.
Wow.
See, I like that dynamic, Mark, because then you have Solo, who's that silent killer, but then you're going to have somebody that's just off the wall. And Tama Tonga, it sounds like if they go the way that Bully is saying, and honestly, from what we saw on Friday, that's more of a probability than anything else, then you're going to have that guy that's the one that you're afraid of. So you have the silent killer, and then that's quiet, doesn't give you any kind of expression. You don't know what you can't read him by his facial expression. And then you have the one that's just off the wall.
Pick your poison.
Yeah, pretty much, right?
What death do you want? Death by 1,000 cuts, or just the sword right through you?
Joe Pesci in Goodfellas, he'd whack you just for the sake of whacking you.
Yeah. What do you mean I'm funny?
Yeah. Could you see Tama come into the ring with the bloodline and all of a sudden just some guy randomly looks at him and he just takes his face and he plants it into a wall? And they're like, why'd you do that? Why not?
And this also sets up Jay and Jimmy Uso as well. Because now that, Jay is out of the bloodline, now it looks like Jimmy, is he out of the bloodline? We don't know. We're not going to see Jimmy for a while. Paul Heyman, when they asked Paul Heyman, how's Jimmy? He's like, not good. Not good. So we're not going to see Jimmy. But maybe this is the start of the reconciliation between Jimmy and Jay Uso.
And you have to have sometimes advancement by subtraction. Like if the Usos are around, then people will be thinking about them. If you want to get Tama over, you have to take somebody away, and that was a good move. That's a great strategy.
Well, that's why you don't get the fearful, addition and more additions where it's out of control, where you get the latter days of the NWO. But it also, I think the fans would love, and that kind of starts Bully, what you were talking about earlier, like the two bloodlines, where you have a returning Roman Reigns associating himself with Jimmy and Jey Uso, and then you have Solo and Tama Tonga, and maybe more additions. I mean, there's all these rumors about Jacob Fatu being a part of this as well. So imagine having, I mean, and
maybe Zilla.
Is it safe to say that Jacob Fatu's maybe the best wrestler that nobody has seen? I mean, Jacob Fatu is amazing.
He's special.
Yeah, we've been praising Jacob Fatu for years. He's been on this show many, many times. The busted open that you hear every day, that's Jacob Fatu. So, I mean, I feel like at some point we're going to get Jacob Fatu. And Jacob Fatu is one of those guys. I mean, you talk about Solo. That guy could do anything, Jacob Fatu.
Have you seen Zilla?
Yes.
Man, what a good-looking human being. And just physically intimidating.
But he's still young, Mark.
He's still young.
He's still new, and he's still young. Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga, they've been paying their dues. Tama's been at it now for more than 10 years. Jacob probably close to that.
Yeah.
So they got some seasoning under their belt. Zilla still needs to be developed.
Yeah,
but I get where you're coming from.
3 years. Yeah.
And I love the addition of fresh blood, new meat into an already great story, new dynamics. Who are you? Why are you here? Who are you related to? What part of the family are you? What's your beef? Why now? Just those questions right then and there.
I thought it was great the way The Rock and Roman put both family trees and how they connected to one giant tree into the roots. Like, I thought that was great. All you got to do is make that T-shirt and just introduce people.